One of the most dangerous aspects of the recent riots in our cities is the growing division of our people based on the color of their skin, and the leftist education that predominates our education system today, creating a youth in our nation that hasn't got a clue of the responsibilities of citizenship. Our form of government was based on the idea of equality before the law. This is starting to break down among a sizable segment of our society. What we are witnessing is the treatment of some people more unequally than others. For instance, in major cities, the looters were arrested and then almost immediately turned loose to resume their activities. By government edict, people were not allowed to attend church, but could apparently burn them down. All across the country, we have witnessed police and government officials surrendering to the mobs and their violence. This is done, of course, in the name of racial equality. Organizations such as Black Lives Matter appear to promote peace between the races, but in reality, they are Marxist and promote division. If you've been watching closely, you've seen that all of the agitation has been carefully crafted into the creation of even more racial animosity. What happened to the idea of healing the problems of racial division? What we are witnessing is a common tactic used by many Marxists to divide the people. When looking at the current situation, many citizens see the looters and rioters, media coverage, along with police and authorities kneeling before demonstrators. As a result of such actions, individuals grow discouraged, angry, or develop a feeling of resentment. These feelings are often reflected in racial feelings rather than against what is really happening right before their eyes. Communist agitation designed to get people mad at one another. Some years ago, I was involved with about a dozen other people back in the 1960s in preventing a planned riot. As I have pointed out recently, these riots are planned. We knew that a riot had been planned in my city, and so a tabloid was printed up informing the people of the plan, what to do to prepare for it and stay home, and particularly to keep their children at home as well. Don't let them out in the streets. We doorbelled this tabloid all over the central district of the city. The planned riot in my city was really part of a nationally planned program of mayhem by the communists. While the rest of the country was burning from coast to coast, my metropolitan area had a very quiet weekend. Cincinnati did as well, where other members of the John Birch Society did the same as we had done. I also worked with a group of conservative Black Americans who had formed an organization in their neighborhood to protect it from the encroachment of the federal government to reform their area, which would have resulted in making the lives of the Black Americans worse in the long run. This was the old Model Cities program of taking the homes of the Black Americans and building parks and hospitals, etc., in the area, all in the name of helping the Black citizens. As one elderly Black man said, "How can I enjoy all of this progress if I don't have my home and no longer live here?" It was one of the schemes of the federal government to try and make things better for the Black community and place them under more and more restrictions and control by the federal government rather than the city. In reality, it was taking prime property away from the central area citizens and giving it to rich businessmen to develop, who could not have done so unless the government got control of the neighborhoods in the first place. Many don't realize that the conservative Black Americans were also opposed to the so-called civil rights movement because they saw that the leaders of this movement were very subtle in their desire to create a communist America by first dividing the people by race. The civil rights leader had the reputation of being nonviolent, but did all they could to provoke violence by the white community in order to move their agenda forward. Let me give you an example. Say that you were walking down the street and took a piece of gum out of your pocket and threw the wrapping on the sidewalk. Suddenly, a person would run up to you and start berating you for littering, yelling at you until you picked up the wrapping and took it to the nearest trash can. All the while, the irate person was yelling and continued to yell at you as you deposited the wrapper in the trash and started to walk away. They just wouldn't let it go. Now, how would you feel about such a person? This is the tactic used by agitators against people to get them to have ill feelings about, in the current cases, Black Lives Matter type people being in one's face. If you were indifferent before, You either take a knee or you've developed an animosity towards those who behave in this manner. Couple that with the absurdity of wanting to eliminate the police as a solution to violence, and you get a sizable segment of society that really starts to have racial animosities, and this is what they want. The communists behind all of this are deliberately setting the stage for creating and exploiting as much division as possible among the American people. We must not fall into their trap. Instead, recognize it for what it is, and then help others understand the tactic of dividing in order to conquer. Remember, not all in the black communities go along with what you see on your television. Also, pay close attention to the proposals that are being made to change government. Promoting the change in voting procedures, for instance, and eliminating the police are simply those in power exposing themselves for what they really are, Marxists. These are not new proposals. The people that have been elected are now showing their true colors, what they really stand for, Marxism. We need to have a closer look at just who we are electing to local office, the mayor, city council, and city attorney. Many people who have opposed what's going on in the street or opposed the ridiculous remedies have been called racists. It is reminiscent of the name-calling that was thrown at the John Birch Society back in the 1960s and 70s, because we were exposing what was going on. Some of this has remained in the histories written by leftists and even certain neoconservatives who repeat this nonsense. We were tar-brushed with invectives in order to try and silence us and separate us from the mainstream of American society. It only worked to a partial extent. Today, the same tactic of calling people racist for opposing the Marxist thrust of the agitators continues, and we will continue to expose what's going on ourselves. People need to stand up for what they know to be right without allowing the situation to get to the point where we lose our bearings and allow the communists in the streets and City Hall to change our cities into lawless enclaves. Remember, hate is the tool of the communist. Love, coupled with responsibility, is the tool of the peacemaker. Do all you can to help lessen the animosity that grows out of violence and get people to understand that what they see happening in the streets is not really about race, it's about communism. A helpful tool I encourage you to send for is a booklet we published 3 years ago on Antifa entitled Domestic Terror, Antifa Unmasked. We've been calling for these people to be called terrorists for some time. Note also in the booklet a photo of Antifa thugs carrying a Black Lives Matter sign some years ago. It's been part of their script for agitation for a long time. As you can see from this photo, the more things change, the more they stay the same.